To my dear friend who lives in the world beside mine, I hope this message finds you well. I am writing this letter from my small apartment, while the city outside my window glows in quiet lines of light. By the time you hear my words, a decision that could change my whole life may already be in motion. In about 6 hours, an unseen system will decide whether I stay with the person I love or start again with someone new. I was told that people in your world choose their own relationships in a very different way. So tonight, I want to tell you how it works here and why my hands are shaking on the keyboard. In my world, breakups do not start with a long argument or a slow cold silence. They start with a notification. On my tablet, in the corner of the screen, an icon lights up in soft blue. It is simple and calm and looks almost friendly. Inside that calm icon, my whole emotional life can be rearranged. We call the system the Compatibility Engine. People say the name so often that most of us shorten it and just say the engine. The engine has been part of my life since before I was born. My parents joke that they did not decide to have me, the engine decided that they should. When I was a child, I thought that was a sweet line in a family story. Now I am not so sure whether it sounds sweet or heavy. The engine watches more than you might expect. It tracks our heart rates and our sleep and the way our voices change when we talk to people. It listens to how often we laugh and how often we speak in a flat, tired tone. It measures how long we stay in a room with someone and how we act after we leave them. It knows which messages I open first in the morning. It knows which ones I avoid until late at night. In school, the engine decided who sat next to me. It picked the girl who would calm me down while I was nervous before an exam. It picked the boy who would push me to study harder when my scores slipped. Teachers said our classroom was a success story because fights were rare and test results were high. I remember feeling grateful, and I did not question anything. The first time I started to question the engine was when my grandmother told me stories from before it existed. She said that in her youth, people met at random in trains, in shops, in parks, and at parties. She said people dated because they liked a smile, or a joke, or the way someone moved their hands. She also said that many relationships were painful and chaotic, and that loneliness was very common. When she talks about her past, her voice has both sadness and a strange kind of pride. According to her, people used to stay in harmful relationships because they were afraid they would never meet anyone else. They would stay in jobs that drained them because they did not know where to go. They would cling to friends who were unkind because they were scared of being alone at night with their thoughts. My grandmother says the engine was built to fix all of that. At first, it was simple. It was a tool that helped people find partners who shared their values and their dreams. It suggested friends based on hobbies and interests. It guided people toward jobs that matched their skills. People loved it, the way they love anything that makes life easier and more hopeful. Over time, the engine became more than a tool. It slowly moved from suggestion to expectation. Governments and companies trusted its predictions more than human instinct. Insurance systems, schools and hospitals started to plug into it. Now, if you refuse the engine for too long, the world quietly closes its doors around you. In my world, each person goes through what we call relationship cycles. At certain ages, the engine reviews our data and the data of everyone around us. It searches for the arrangement of friendships, families, and work teams that will create the highest overall well-being. It looks at stress levels, creativity scores, social stability, and many other things I do not fully understand. When the engine decides something important has shifted, it sends a notice. The notice that arrived today told me that my relationship has become suboptimal for the next 10-year cycle. According to the engine, My current partner and I are not the best match for the future that lies ahead. It suggests a new person for me, someone whose profile supposedly harmonizes perfectly with mine. The engine says our projected emotional development curves are nearly perfect together. It says we will support each other through future economic shifts and personal health risks. It gives our potential relationship a higher rating than the one I have now. On paper, that should be enough. In our society, following the engine is seen as the responsible thing to do. People who choose against it are seen as romantic in a reckless way, like they are gambling with more than their own lives. Our choices affect the web of other relationships around us, so the engine calls a stubborn decision a social cost. There is a small group of people here who try to live outside that web. They call themselves free linkers. They try to form relationships without engine approval and without engine guidance. They meet in places where sensors are weak and they leave their devices at home. The engine still gathers some data from cameras and street systems, but it loses a lot of detail when they do that. I met a few free linkers at an art event last year. They invited me to what they called a random connection night. The rules were simple. You arrive alone, you talk to whoever sits down next to you, and you do not exchange any device tags that the engine can use. You just talk and see whether you feel drawn to stay or to leave. I remember sitting at a long table with soft lights and plain cups of tea. The chairs were mismatched and a little uncomfortable, which felt strange in a world that optimizes everything. Across from me sat a woman with tired eyes and a restless smile. She told me she had left 3 engine-approved relationships because they felt too safe. She said she missed the feeling of not knowing how a conversation would land. I also ended up talking to a man whose metrics were labelled unstable by the engine. He laughed too loudly, he spoke out of turn, and his mood swung around like a loose store in the wind. But his stories had a kind of spark that I rarely see in my assigned social circles. He said that when he connects with people, it feels like he is jumping into a river without a map. I went home that night with my head full of questions. Since then, I have not become a free linker, at least not in an open way. I still use the engine for my daily life. My job team is chosen for me. My living area and my neighbours are chosen for me. Even the local cafe I visit is recommended by a comfort algorithm. Yet a part of me keeps replaying a night at a random event. I remember how I felt when nobody around me knew my compatibility score. Nobody could see the numbers that float above my interactions in most systems. For a few, there's just a person with a voice in a room, not a pattern in a datum. Maybe that is why this new notice from the engine hits me so deeply. If I follow its suggestion, I know the next relationship will probably be stable and supportive. The engine will design our fights to be brief and educational. It will nudge us away from bitterness and toward compromise. It will try very hard to keep us both productive, creative, and healthy. If I refuse the suggestion, my life may become harder in ways that are not always visible. Insurance premiums may move against me. My job assignments may become less ideal, because the engine will need to balance my personal choice with the needs of the wider network. My social invitations might drop as well, since group matches depend on predicted harmony. So you can see why it is not a simple choice between 2 people. It is also a choice between 2 different ways of understanding what a life is supposed to be. One way sees life as a shared optimization task. The other way sees life as a path full of surprises that might hurt but might also teach something deep and personal. I have been thinking a lot about your world, even though I know very little about it. I imagine you waking up in the morning without any engine chart waiting for you. I imagine you making coffee and checking your messages when things appear in no particular order. You choose who to reply to first simply because you feel like it. When you meet someone you like, I imagine that your heart speeds up with uncertainty. You do not have a clear signal that says this person is a 93% match. You listen to their stories and you try to guess whether they will be kind or cruel to you. Sometimes you are right, and sometimes you are painfully wrong. I wonder how that feels from the inside. Does it feel like freedom, or does it feel like walking along a cliff in the dark? Do you ever wish for a quiet voice in your ear that tells you who to trust? Or would that voice feel like a thief, taking away something essential from your choices? My grandmother says that in her youth, heartbreaks were like storms. They arrived without warning, they tore down the careful structures people built, and they left pieces everywhere. Some people never fully recovered, and some people grew stronger in ways they never expected. She says that the worst part was not the pain itself, but the sense that it might all be meaningless. The engine promised to reduce that kind of chaos. It can still be wrong, but it is wrong less often than humans acting alone. It avoids pairings where there is a high chance of abuse, cruelty, or destructive behaviour. As a result, many children grow up in calmer homes and safer neighbourhoods. Many elders are not alone in their final years. These are not small things. They are the reasons why most people here accept engine notices, without much argument. When I was younger, I thought that was the whole story. I thought a good life was one where the numbers stayed in the right range and the graphs kept rising. However, the older I get, the more I notice something missing in the quiet. There is a kind of courage that never gets exercised when your relationship's always guided. There is a kind of responsibility that never fully forms when you can always blame or credit a system for your path. Sometimes I look at my partner across the room and ask myself a question I'm afraid to say out loud. If the engine had not assigned us to each other, would I still have found him and chosen him on my own? Or would we have walked past each other on the street and never turned our heads? When he makes me laugh, is it because we are truly like this, or because years of alignment nudges have reshaped us to fit? When I feel safe with him, is that safety mine, or is it rented from a system that can change its mind? Tonight he is in the next room, reading this same notice that I received. The engine has sent him a match as well. Our numbers no longer rise together in the way it prefers. We are both being invited, politely, to step out of each other's futures. We talked about it over dinner, which felt both very ordinary and very strange. The food was simple, and the lights in our kitchen were warm. He held his cup with both hands, which he does when he is trying to be brave. We spoke about the pros and cons the same way people discuss a new job offer. He said he wants me to be as happy as possible, even if that means a different partner. I said I want the same for him, and I meant it. At the same time, there was a pause between us that the engine could not fill in. In that pause, there were all the unsaid things like I am scared and I do not want to lose you. The strange part is that neither of us can prove that staying together is the braver choice. Maybe it is actually a kind of fear, a fear of giving up what is known for something that might be better. Or maybe following the engine is the fear-based choice, a fear of stepping off the smooth path it made for us. I do not know the answer yet. That is why I'm writing to you. You live with more uncertainty, from what I understand. You have to decide when to stay, when to leave, when to try again, and when to really let go. You do this without a shared authority telling you which choice will help the greatest number of people. Sometimes I wonder if you carry a heavier burden because of that. Maybe your heartbreaks are deeper, and your regrets are sharper. But maybe your joys feel more truly yours as well. When a relationship in your world works, you know it is not because some distant system arranged it for you. I think about what a story means in each of our worlds. Here, the engine likes stories with smooth arcs and gentle lessons. It likes outcomes where people grow in steady lines and societies remain stable. Your world, as I imagine it, allows for sudden turns and strange coincidences. It allows for people to meet at inconvenient times and love each other anyway. My grandmother once told me that meaning often comes from the parts of life we did not plan. She says that when everything is safe, life can start to feel flat. I can see what she means when I look back at the chapters of my life that moved me the most. They were not the ones that the engine predicted with perfect confidence. Meeting the free linkers, for example, changed how I see every chart the engine draws. Watching someone with unstable metrics tell a funny, painful story about his worst decision made me feel awake. He said that his greatest mistake also led to his most important friendship. The engine would never design a path like that on purpose. I do not want to pretend that I am ready to throw away all the safety nets. I have seen what can happen in the absence of guidance, in old news archives and in my grandmother's eyes. Violence, neglect and despair are very real in unplanned systems. I am grateful that fewer children here grow up in fear, but I am beginning to believe that a good life needs both safety and risk. It needs both patterns and breaks in the patterns. It needs both trusted routes and wrong turns that teach us who we are. I do not know how to ask the engine for that balance. Perhaps that is why I find myself talking to you instead. You are close enough to understand, and distant enough to see from another angle. You live next door to my reality, and maybe you could hold a mirror up to it. Even if you never write back, imagining your answers helps me think. If you could sit at this desk with me, I would ask you simple questions. When you think about the people you love most, how did you meet them? Did someone else choose that moment for you, or did it come out of confusion and timing and luck? When you stay with someone through a hard season, what keeps you there? Do you tell yourself that you chose this person and will choose them again tomorrow? Or do you sometimes wish you could hand your heart to an outside judge and say, "Decide for me"? Would you trust the judge if it claimed to know you better than you know yourself? And if your judge changed its mind later, would you follow? As I wait for the night to move forward, our city grows quieter. On the building across from mine, I can see the glow of windows slowly going dark. Somewhere behind those windows, other people are receiving notices like the one I received. Some are ending friendships, some are starting new careers, and some are being told to move to new homes. Most of them will accept, because that is what we do. Some will resist, in small or large ways. A few will slip out into the shadows with the free linkers and try to make choices on their own. The engine will adjust its models to account for all of them. I know that whatever I decide tonight will become part of that adjustment. My choice will add a tiny line to a giant pattern. The question is how much weight I should give to that pattern, and how much weight I should give to the quiet voice in my own chest. That voice is not always wise, but it is mine. I realize that I have written to you for a long time without telling you what I plan to do. That is because I am still not sure. By the time you hear this, I may already have told the engine yes or no. Maybe future letters will make that answer clear, if I'm brave enough to send them. For now, I want to leave you with the thought that has been circling in my mind all evening. A life guided by a system can be safe and kind and still feel incomplete. A life guided only by impulse can be vivid and deep and still cause harm. The art, I think, is to keep learning how to choose while caring about more than just yourself. Whether or not you have an engine in your world, you still face that art every day. You choose whose messages you answer, whose calls you ignore, and whose hand you hold a little longer. You choose when to say yes, and when to say this is not for me. Those choices shape not only your story, but the stories of everyone around you. If you remember anything from this letter, I would like it to be this. Even in a world like mine, where a system watches and calculates, there are still moments that belong only to us. They are the seconds before we click accept or decline. They are the breaths before we say I will stay or I will go. In those small spaces between suggestion and action, something human remains that no engine can predict perfectly. I think the same is true in your world, even without such a system. In those spaces, you and I are not just data points or roles. We are people trying to live lives that feel honest where we look back on them. Thank you for staying with me through this long letter from a neighbouring reality. It means more than you know that you listened all the way to the end. If you would like to keep hearing from my world and from others like it, please like this video. Please also subscribe to the Multiverse Penpals channel and leave a comment sharing what this letter made you think about. If you feel moved to support more messages between our worlds, you can make a donation through the QR code in the corner of the video or through the link in the video description. In that description, you will also find links to other works from completely different series that explore very different ideas and stories. For now, I will say goodnight, and I hope you will visit this channel again when the next letter arrives. With care and curiosity from your friend who lives in a world beside yours,